Mopaika Kösem Sultan, one of the most powerful female figures in the history of the Ottoman Empire, was the lawful wife of Sultan Ahmed I and the mother of Sultans Murad IV and Ibrahim. She emerged as one of the most formidable and influential women in Ottoman history, playing a central role in the period later referred to as the Sultanate of Women. As the regent, she effectively governed the Ottoman Empire for approximately 20 years. She is the only Ottoman Sultan who successfully placed two of her sons on the throne and subsequently witnessed her grandson's accession. Additionally, she holds the distinction of being the only valid Sultan Queen Mother in Ottoman history to be assassinated valid immortal. She became a symbol of female dominance in the Ottoman harem, reaching its pinnacle during the era known as the Sultanate of Women, which began with Haseki Hürrem Sultan. In historical literature and popular culture, she is credited with elevating this period to its zenith. In 1623, Kösem Sultan attempted to govern the state as the regent, a role unprecedented in Ottoman tradition, and largely succeeded. She has become one of the most significant names when discussing women in politics and administration throughout the history of politics and governance. After her childhood, she entered the palace of the Bosnian Beylerbey due to her beauty and intelligence. She was eventually sent to the Darasad Aga in the Ottoman Palace in Istanbul by the Bosnian Beylerbey. When she arrived at the palace in 1604, Safiye Sultan was sent to the Old Palace, January 9, 1604, and the influence of Handan Sultan in the harem began. According to the rules, the old valid Sultan would be sent away when a new valid Sultan arrived. This event had an impact on Kösem Sultan, and years later, when her grandson ascended the throne, she did not go to the Old Palace and, as a result of the discord in the harem, she was killed. There are two narratives regarding Anastasia taking the name Kösem. When she entered the palace, the first is related to her having a smooth complexion, which is a weak narrative. The other, stronger narrative is that she guided and directed other concubines in the palace, acting as a trusted person who knows when and what to do, or one who guides and directs a group, which is why she was given the name Kösem. When Anastasia entered the palace, she took the name Mopaika. However, as she gradually provided guidance to other concubines, she was given the name Kösem. Kösem, chosen by Handan Valid Sultan, was presented to Sultan Ahmed as a half-regent, as Sultan Ahmed was a child at the time, and Handan Sultan personally managed the state on behalf of her son. In this regard, Leslie Pierce assumes that Handan Sultan was a powerful figure during her son's reign, imparting many things mentally to her inexperienced son and effectively managing the state. Behind the scenes, Handan Valid Sultan sent many concubines to her son to bear him a child, but Sultan Ahmed showed little interest in the concubines. Handan Sultan, a kind-hearted woman, prevented the killing of Wezaid Mustafa. 13. The issue remained closed until 1612 for her death. In March 1604, Sultan Ahmed and his brother Wezaid Mustafa experienced a deadly illness. Facing the threat of the dynasty's extinction, the Sultan and the prince could only recover in April. Therefore, it became clear that Sultan Ahmed needed to have a child as soon as possible. Sultan Ahmed is known as a devout ruler, and this piety is generally attributed to the influence of his mother. During this period, he acquainted himself with Aziz Mahmud Hadayi and visited him along with his mother. After the demise of his mother, Kösem Sultan often accompanied Sultan Ahmed on these visits. Upon the death of the valid Sultan, who managed the harem until 1605, Sultan Ahmed was deeply affected. This event led to a significant transformation in his demeanor, evolving from his previous calm disposition to a more severe ruler, implementing harsh sanctions against those who rebelled. As long as Handan Valid Sultan, who wielded considerable influence over her son, was alive, Kösem had limited opportunities for advancement. After the demise of Handan Valid Sultan, Dervipaya, who had managed to convince Sultan Ahmed not to believe in Kösem, exerted his influence. However, his execution in 1606 quickly paved the way for the young Sultan Ahmed to succumb to the influence of Kösem Sultan. Sultan Ahmed's first wife gradually fell out of favor. There are even accounts of a severe altercation between Sultan Ahmed and one of his concubines, possibly in 1607, causing displeasure when he became aware of it. It is noted that he reprimanded both concubines involved in the dispute. Sultan Ahmed's marital relationship. None of the existing Ottoman sources mention that Sultan Ahmed married Kösem, with few exceptions. Ottoman rulers did not formalize marriages with their consorts. Foreign sources often avoid discussing the topic of marriage regarding Kösem, leaving it ambiguous. For instance, in 1609, Venetian envoy Bon reported that Ahmed had 4 children with 3 women, but did not marry any of them. Edward Grimstone, extending Richard Knoll's book The General History of the Turks until 1621, mentioned Kösem as Ahmed's wife, but the nature of this relationship remains debated. Recent research by Xlem Kumrula in the Venetian State Archives uncovered a decree announcing the enthronement of Sultan Murad IV. In this document, Kösem Sultan is referred to as the beloved mother and praised as the esteemed and accepted wife of the late and forgiven Sultan Ahmed, clearly indicating that she was married to Ahmed. In summary, just like her predecessors, such as Hürrem Sultan, Kösem Sultan successfully achieved the honor of being the legal wife of her spouse. Relationship with her stepson. When Wazid Osman was young, Kösem used to take him on carriage rides, and he enjoyed showing himself by throwing money to those by the roadside. However, Ahmed later intervened in this relationship between his son and concubine. In 1616, Envoy Valia reported that the Sultan had prohibited meetings between Kösem and Osman. Perhaps the reason was, as Valia interpreted, the fear that Kösem's well-known plans for her son's future could jeopardize the safety of the princes. Another possible reason was the inappropriate perception of an adolescent prince being in the company of an unrelated woman. Nevertheless, the relationship resumed after Ahmed's death. In 1619, Osman, now Sultan, honored Kösem with a 3-day feast at the Old Palace.